Welcome back to DemocraZy. I'm your co-host, Charvi.
And I'm your co-host, Emma.
DemocraZy is a podcast brought to you by the League of Women Voters of Virginia Youth Council.
We are back with our fourth episode, which is called How Did Zohran Mamdani Win? Thank you so much to my friend Peter for making that music for us. I still do owe you a Chipotle burrito, but it's okay. Also, thank you so much to my friend Maddie for making our logo that you'll find on all of our social medias, which you should follow at DemocraZy_pod, as well as Nikki and our entire social media team, and Joan Port, the president of the lovely League of Women Voters of Virginia.
Woo! Round of applause for those people. They really help us so much behind the scenes. Okay, before we start today, I really would like to take a moment for my brand new Awala. It's pink, it's so cute, and I really love it. And I feel like I belong in the TikTok community now.
Girl, everyone has Owalas. Come on, let's talk about Olympic figure skating or something.
Oh my god.
I love Olympic figure skating. The women's Olympic figure skating team makes me so happy, and they're all so happy, and they love each other, and they're all friends. And Alyssa Liu is just
Blade
such
Angels.
She's just such like a cutie, and she's always so happy and smiling, and like watching her makes me really happy.
Have you seen that one headline by the news article that was like alt, gay, and from New Jersey?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Incredible. Also, can we talk about how Alyssa Liu's dad was like a Chinese refugee from Tiananmen Square and was like.
She actually refused to skate for China. She chose to skate for the United States.
And she went to the Beijing Olympics, and like the CCP like went after her.
Oh my gosh.
It was crazy.
I actually did not know that.
She's a baddie.
I am a huge fan of figure skating. I've been here since like 2018. Would just like to put that out there. I love you, Zohran.
When you were like a child.
Yes.
Speaking of gay ice sport players, have you seen Heated Rivalry Charvi?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Heated Rivalry is all over my TikTok For You page.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, and my best friend keeps sending me like reels and edits of them all the time, constantly on TikTok. But Heated Rivalry's gotten really popular. You know who else really loves Heated Rivalry?
Zohran Mamdani.
Mayor
he did
in
fact give everyone free access to it through New York Public Libraries when it snows. So we have,
I remember he was like, during the snow, you guys should watch Heated Rivalry.
We have an ally mayor of New York City. Go off.
Speaking of Mamdani, that brings us to today's Civic Case.
So Civic Cases is our segment where we're kind of going to introduce a question that'll bring us into our interview, which you'll hear about later. So today our question is, how did Zohran win?
Yeah, and we're not talking about Zohran Mamdani's policies per se. We're going to talk about, zooming out, ranked choice voting. That's the system that New York employs to elect mayors, and it's a really big part of how Mamdani's campaign worked and how he was able to become the mayor that we know today. So let's talk about what ranked choice voting is for a second. It sounds a lot more complicated than it actually is. Basically, what you do on a ranked choice voting ballot is, if there are 4 candidates, you write who's your number 1, who's your number 2, who's your number 3 in order of preference. If your first choice candidate does not win the first round of ballots, then it moves on to your second choice. And that way, your votes keep going and making it to the final round of voting.
Yeah, so you're really kind of just democratizing the process and making everything more fair, because under a non-ranked choice voting system, it's really easy for a person without 50% of the vote, assuming there are more than 2 candidates, which most of the time there are, actually, especially in primaries where ranked choice voting is used. You're just making sure that to win, you have to have at least a 50% majority. And that just makes the process a lot more democratic and a lot more reliant on what could potentially be a minority of people wanting this candidate to win.
Yeah, exactly. Like right now, the system that Emma is describing, I think, is plurality voting, right? Yeah, so it could be a situation where if you have 4 candidates and 3 of them get 20% of the votes, and then the last one gets, I need to do math. Last one gets 40% of the votes.
Good job.
Yes. 40% is not the majority of the electorate, but it is the most number of votes a candidate got. Ranked choice voting makes it so that the final candidate that stands actually gets a large portion, a majority of the electorate's votes. So that goes back to democratizing the entire process and making sure that your ballot makes it to the end of the road.
Yeah. Okay, so to talk about this, we should also talk about how ranked choice voting became such a huge part of Zohran Mamdani's actual campaign strategy. Yeah. So obviously that's the way the structure works in New York. We knew that. But the real question is whether kind of ranked choice voting aware campaigning, so using ranked choice as a strategy for campaigning and kind of educating people about how it works in your campaign, whether that can make people actually understand the system better. And the real question is kind of whether voters learn the system through campaigning and through actually voting.
I think that's definitely a really important thing to talk about, because ranked choice voting, it would be a different form of voting itself, but it will really influence how campaigns would work as well. And we've seen that a lot with Mamdani, and we're actually gonna show you guys an example of how Mamdani and his fellow candidates, they worked together because of the way that ranked choice voting works.
So now we're going to watch an example of that in Zohran Mamdani's campaigning. We're going to look at Instagram, because social media was obviously such a big part of his campaign, outreach to Gen Z voters. So let's watch a quick video and then kind of discuss it.
Hey!
Hey, good morning.
How's it going?
Please go second.
No, I insist you go second.
How about I go first and you go second?
Well...
Zohran, you've done a remarkable job building a historic grassroots campaign for a New York City all New Yorkers can afford.
Brad, you've been a principled
like
progressive
you were
leader in
watching
our
the
city
video.
for years.
Well, you want to tell them?
You go first.
Nah, you go first.
Let's do it together. We're cross-endorsing.
In New York City, we have ranked choice voting. That means you can rank up to 5 candidates for mayor.
Brad and I are officially telling our supporters.
Rank
I'm your
me number one, rank
Brad
Zohran number 2. Let's send Andrew Cuomo
back to the suburbs.
Yeah, so that video was kind of just another example of how Zohran is using ranked choice voting to his advantage, and even working with his competitors and kind of creating a much less adversarial system by saying, I think I should be your first choice, but you should put Charvi as second. Charvi's saying the same thing about me. And so it's just making everything a lot more civilized, I think.
Yeah, for sure. This is something that we're going to get into with our guests today a little bit more, but ranked choice voting definitely has the impact of reducing negative campaigning, and negative campaigning is a really big part of why our elections may feel more hostile, especially in the modern day. We talk about polarization and all those are buzzwords, and a lot of it comes down to negative campaigning and just how elections get so heated and not in the best ways. So ranked choice voting really allows us to zoom out of those discussions and find different systems that might make our current system better.
Yeah, and even within Virginia and places like Arlington and even Charlottesville, there are really good local examples of ranked choice voting being implemented and being successful.
It's used in a lot of primaries in Arlington, for sure. So that's why it's also so relevant to Virginia, is that we already have RCV in certain localities, but it's something that really has potential to create positive impact and be shared in other places.
Yeah, and I think to talk about that more, we can kind of segue into our interview. Our guest is Liz White, the executive director of Upvote Virginia, which is a really great organization that's kind of pioneering all of these efforts to make RCV more prevalent within Virginia.
So let's take it away. Welcome back. We are here with our guest, Liz White. She's the executive director of Upvote Virginia, a nonpartisan organization that champions ranked choice voting. How are you doing today, Liz?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me.
So other than being the director of this really cool organization that we're going to talk about more, you also have a background in theater, which is really cool. It might seem unrelated for a lot of people who are watching, but politics is actually theater in a lot of ways, isn't it?
It is. I like to joke that I have a theater degree and a background in sales, and if you put those two together, you really have most of the skills you need to be in and around politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Charvi and I have been looking at ranked choice voting, specifically with Zohran Mamdani's recent campaign as a case study, because that's kind of one of the most prominent examples of ranked choice voting out in the wild that people might know about. So can you tell us in your own words kind of what ranked choice voting is?
Yes, absolutely. So ranked choice voting is, we like to say, it's a simple change to the way people fill out their ballots that brings about better voter experience, better campaigns, and ultimately leads to better government. So it gets painted with this brush that it's really complicated and really different. But all it is for the voter is, instead of picking one candidate, you get to pick your favorite candidate and then rank backup choices. A few things. One, it means that we don't have to vote like pundits. You can actually just vote your heart. And if your favorite candidate is an underdog, that's okay. You can still cast your vote for them, loud and proud, and then rank maybe some front runners in your mix The goal for ranked choice voting is to identify the candidate that has the support of the majority of voters. And that's not how our elections work for the most part now. If you have 5 people running, someone can win with 22%. And we just kind of all go, okay, well, they got the most votes, but that means 78% of voters wanted somebody else. So it's, as soon as you dig a little deeper, you kind of go, well, that doesn't feel democratic. That doesn't feel good. And as soon as you get into those crowded fields, the chances that somebody's going to clear that 50% threshold is pretty small. They get pretty small. So with ranked choice voting, we count those first choice votes. If nobody has hit 50% yet, the candidate with the fewest first choice votes gets eliminated. If that's your candidate, if you voted for that person, now your vote's going to count for your second choice. So in the second round, if your first choice is still in the mix, your vote stays put. But if your first choice has been eliminated, now your vote's going to move to your second choice. And we just keep going. They call it instant runoffs, and it's just this series of runoffs until you get a candidate to 50%. And one of the many advantages, we don't do a whole lot of runoffs in Virginia. But if you think of places like Georgia, it's got to come back again 4 weeks later. They've got to keep spending money. Voter turnout plummets. The election, you have to run another election again, which is a lot of money for the state or the locality. We're going to do it all in one go.
Yeah, and I think what happens a lot of time is like when you have a primary with a bunch of people, only the people who are really, really civically active and always vote are the ones who are voting in the primaries. And so people complain about like only having the extremes in elections, but that's the problem, is that the moderates kind of get eliminated before they can even get on the ballot.
Myths about ranked choice voting is that you can only get elected if you're a moderate. And I think some people go, oh, good, it's going to only elect moderate candidates. And some people go, oh, no, it's only going to elect moderate candidates. And what it really does is elect candidates who are representative of the electorate as a whole. So if the electorate is more moderate, which often happens, a lot of times voters are more moderate than the average elected official. But if your electorate is more moderate, then that's who they're going to pick. But it does not mean that somebody who's super progressive or super conservative can't win if that's what their voters want.
I think that also brings up a really interesting question. Right now, as you mentioned before, most of our elections operate on a majority rules kind of situation. But how would ranked choice voting affect campaigning?
So one of the big things, and we've heard this from candidates in Virginia, from Arlington and Charlottesville, who are the 2 localities who've employed ranked choice voting. We've also heard it from candidates in the Republican statewide primaries from 2021. They were able to use ranked choice voting because it was an unassembled convention. It was a party-run process, so they got to set the rules. So now former Governor Youngkin, Lieutenant Governor Sears, and Attorney General Miyares were all nominated with ranked choice voting. And we've heard from candidates in all of those races, not to mention, of course, places like New York and Alaska, that it disincentivizes negative campaigning, especially in a primary, especially when you're competing for all the same voters. If you go trash your opponent to their supporters, those supporters are just going to get angry with you. Whereas if you go to that person's supporters and say, oh, yeah, I have a lot in common with this candidate you support, I hope you'll rank me second. Well, then if that candidate is eliminated before you are, all those votes come to you. That's how you build a coalition. That's how you get to 50%, as opposed to alienating them and losing out completely.
And I almost wonder, negative campaigning can have this effect on amplifying the effects of misinformation. I wonder if ranked choice voting has potential to help us come out of this era of major polarization and just the push of misinformation we see on social media all the time.
Sure, and I hate to pretend that ranked choice voting is going to be, a panacea and just solve everything, but I do think it lowers the temperature. And I think, to your point, the heat and the vitriol just amplifies all of it, right? And if you're slinging false accusations against your opponents, that's misinformation. That's a big category of misinformation, and it's a multi-million-dollar industry. So if that's not benefiting you, all of a sudden we've got to redirect. And so I think the lower temperature also just leaves room for clarity. It leaves room for the voter to really parse through maybe some policy and some truth and some accurate information. So definitely misinformation doesn't go away magically because we let you rank your candidates. But I do think anything that's going to just lower the vitriol and turn down the tenor of the rhetoric around politics right now is good for everybody.
So with that said, why is it so hard to implement ranked choice voting on a larger scale if there are all these positives? Like, is there something that people who don't believe in ranked choice voting says about it being negative and maybe not great to implement? And why is that even like an incorrect assumption or misconception about ranked choice voting?
Sure. I think there are like two buckets of objections that we hear about ranked choice voting. One of them is just bad faith arguments. One of them is their partisan arguments, their self-preservation arguments for elected officials who don't want to see the system that's working for them change. It became the policy has been, I mean, ranked choice voting has been around in the US for 100 years. It's not new. It's been around internationally for 100 years. Ireland and Australia have been using some kind of version of this consistently for the last century. So we didn't make it up. It's not this newfangled thing. My son thinks I made it up, but I just decided to be flattered by that. But it's especially after 2022 when Sarah Palin lost an election in Alaska, and that was the headline, and that was the first time most people were hearing about ranked choice voting. That made it very partisan, and it got painted with this partisan brush. And then Donald Trump came out and said, "Oh, it's rigged. Look at this. My candidate lost. Ranked choice voting must be bad." So places like Utah, which is hardly a blue state, they have had a local option similar to ours since the 90s. And places in Utah, almost 24 localities in Utah, had been using ranked choice voting for local elections for years. And then all of a sudden, it got this partisan label and became this partisan boogeyman. And a lot of them have backed out. They've let that pilot program lapse. And so there's been a lot of regression. So again, there's these partisan bad faith arguments. And then there's, I think, mostly good faith arguments. And they're from folks who say, okay, like, sure, I hear what you're saying. This makes sense. I understand how it works. I want to make sure no one is left behind by it. And it's not because the argument is always, this is too confusing. Ranked choice voting is too confusing for voters. And I like to say it's not confusing. It's just new, and change is hard. And trust, especially around voting issues, has to be earned. So a lot of communities who have been consistently burned by, improvements to voting are, I think, understandably skeptical. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of concern that lower information voters are going to be disadvantaged by a change that, again, surprises them. So that brings in that voter education piece. It's why coalition building is so important. I mean, I can't be this one woman show going into communities and saying, I promise it'll be fine. Like, it has to be bigger than me. It has to be bigger than upvote. It has to be bigger than one similar homogenous group of people.
Yeah, I mean,
so
really
that's the, I was just gonna say, so that's the best argument against it. And I think it is also the most fixable.
Yeah. I think we really hope that this episode also increases our own age group's awareness about ranked choice voting, because, I mean, ultimately, this is our generation that's going to be bringing in these changes in the future. So, yeah. And you mentioned some international models like Australia and I believe the UK. So, Ireland. Yeah. Yes, Australia and Ireland. So, are there any international models that you think are working really, really well that maybe the US can implement?
So what's kind of just cool to see is that there's so many different ways to apply a ranked preferential voting system. Australia uses something called a party list, and New Zealand does something similar. Ireland's is entirely single transferable vote, which is, let's dig way into the weeds. That's what you use when you're electing more than one person at a time. So if you have an at-large city council, say, and you're, now you'd go in our current system, you'd go in and cast your top 5 votes, and whoever get the 5 people with the most votes win. The problem with that is that if 51% of the population picks the same 5 people, then they get all 5 seats. If you use single transferable vote, which is a method to get to proportional representation, and this is what Ireland does with their parliament, they have multi-member districts. So I'm not going to say this is how Ireland works because I do not know this level of detail, but hypothetically, actually, this is what there's a congressional bill, Virginia Congressman Don Beyer has the Fair Representation Act, and what that would do is take any state that has 5 or fewer congressional representatives and make it all one big district. And then voters would come in and they would rank their ballot, but they would choose one person and then their second and third choice, etc. And single transferable vote leads to, if your candidate gets 40% of the vote, or if you're not your candidate, if your party or your ideology or your type of candidate gets 40% of the vote, they get 40% of the seats. Instead of, if you got 51%, you get about half the representation, not all of it. So Ireland uses that kind of system. Arlington and Charlottesville both used single transferable vote on a smaller scale because they have each run an election for 2 people. Mm-hmm. So it's not quite the same scale, but it's similar. So I do think there are lessons to be learned. And again, Ireland's been doing it for 100 years. So people who are seeing this for the first time and going, oh, this feels different and I don't like it, I understand. I mean, voting is sacred, right? People who are civically engaged know people have fought and died for the vote. The League of Women Voters' rich history with women's suffrage is so important. The vote is sacred. It is very scary to talk about changing it. So if you used to have 5 votes and now you only have 1 vote, even if it's ranked, that is an adjustment. So using a place like Ireland, who has this century of precedent, I think is helpful to us to better explain the why of the change and not just the mechanics.
Yeah. Just out of personal curiosity, there's also something called star voting, isn't there, where you have like a certain number of stars and you can say like, I want person A to have 5 of my stars and person B to have the other 5, or like 7 and 3, to like show how much you like each candidate.
Or if there's 15 candidates, you can give 10 people 1 star. There's several different alternative voting methods that have some sort of preferential element to them. All of them are better than what we have now. Ranked choice voting has the advantage of being the most established. Like, again, it's been around for a century. It's got precedent, it's got history, it's got best practices. Certainly in the US, it's the one that is the most, just has the most data behind it, right? Like we've tried it, I hesitate to say perfected because everything can always be improved, but like it runs smoothly. Virginia has run several ranked choice voting elections now without a hitch. And you roughly get the same kinds of outcomes, right? Like you can nitpick and really get into the political science of it, but ranked choice voting, again, is just the most established and has the most infrastructure around it. But star voting, approval voting, anything is better than what we have now, than this first past the post. I'm going to win with 22% kind of system.
Yeah, voting really is sacred, and I think it's always so interesting that our Constitution doesn't even explicitly say that we have the right to vote, but it's always so important to see what alternatives exist to the current system that we have. So thank you for talking with us about this. And what are some actions that we can take to actually maybe push our RCV in Virginia or maybe in our counties?
Absolutely. So right now we're in the middle of the legislative session. We do have 1 bill. Technically 2 bills, but there's a Senate version and a House version. They are identical. We are approaching the halfway point of the legislative session when called crossover. The Senate will take all the bills they've passed and send them over to the House and vice versa. And then they start the whole Schoolhouse Rock thing all over again. And they'll go through the committee process, etc. So it is not too late to reach out to your delegate and senator and tell them to support ranked choice voting, tell them to support this legislation. It is very small because, again, it still sounds new and scary to a lot of people. And this is a budget year, and this is a year with a lot of new delegates. And so it's a new governor, new administration. So this is an incremental step. But what it would do is take the existing law that lets RCV be used in localities for city council or county board of supervisors elections. The locality just has to take a majority vote to adopt that, similar to what Arlington and Charlottesville have done. This just adds towns to the list. So town council elections could be used with ranked choice voting, implements a couple very technical best practices. And I think most importantly, it would make the pilot program permanent. It's currently slated to expire in 2031, and this would make it a permanent option in Virginia, which is very exciting. So there we have an easy advocacy tool. If you're not sure who your delegate and senator are, you fill in your information. Our system knows, it'll send those emails. And so that's really easy. And beyond session, the biggest challenge that we have is just getting the word out. When people say it's hard to teach people about ranked choice voting, no, it's not. Everyone knows how to rank. The information itself is not hard. 2 minutes with any voter, I could teach them how to fill out that ballot. It is not difficult. The challenge, of course, is meeting with and getting the information to every voter. So helping to spread the word, I think especially among young voters, is huge because you guys are the ones who are not afraid of change. You guys are the ones who are looking around. I mean, I'm an elder millennial, so I feel like it's like us and you guys, right, are looking around and going, what is happening? What has been left for us? Something's got to change, and we're not afraid by and large to try something new. The more they can know about ranked choice voting, I think the more it just makes sense to them. So that spreading the word is the biggest thing. You can sign our petition on our website. As I said, you can learn more on our website. We have local action groups around the state. If people want to get involved, you can go collect signatures in the community. There's lots of ways to make this happen because I'm one person and it's a big commonwealth, and we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who turns 18 this year and I'll be able to vote, obviously, it's really exciting for me. And I go to a crazy government school, so we learn about ranked choice voting. I mean, obviously in Virginia, you have to take a government class in high school, but it's not required that you learn about ranked choice voting. It's not required that you learn about a lot of things when you're in high school in Virginia.
Clearly not.
Clearly. And so, like, even though I obviously am very privileged, I go to a government school, I can learn about all of these things. It's really, really different for people who don't go to schools like that.
And all of this starts with just questioning the system that you live in right now, right? You find solutions by not just accepting the environment that you exist in. So yeah, I think with that, we're ready to move back to our main segment. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Liz. That was an incredible interview. Yeah, I just really hope that interview kind of reassured you and anyone else listening that ranked choice voting really isn't all of these big scary changes, and it's really kind of simple to understand once it's being implemented on a local scale.
Yeah, it's just got a lot of capacity for positive change. So it shouldn't be something that scares us, and it's something that we can start looking into in our local levels because local areas are where change occurs, and every small thing matters. With that, our community spotlight for today is actually just going to be up at Virginia because we love Liz, and it's a great organization. They have so many efforts to raise awareness and to educate people about RCV and also just talk about a lot of the things that we talked about today in this podcast episode.
Yeah. So once again, I just want to say thank you so much to the League of Women Voters and Joan Port. Go follow DemocraZy Pod on Instagram, as well as watch and listen on YouTube under the League of Women Voters of Virginia and Spotify under DemocraZy.
And we have one more list of things for you to do. Go buy an Awala, watch Heated Rivalry, go follow Alyssa Liu and Amber Glenn on Instagram.
This is not sponsored or endorsed by any of these companies.
Bye-bye.